Welcome to Real Leaders with Roshini, the podcast with real talk, real questions, real insight, and we hope, real inspiration. For real. We're here at Capitol Grill in downtown Minneapolis, which is no stranger to real leaders. My guest today is Joe Schmit. He is the sports director at KSTP-TV. He is an author, a keynote speaker. He's really blended a lot of worlds. Joe, thanks for being with me today.
Well, good to see you, Roshini.
All right, so I have got to get to this book, okay? Mm-hmm. So you wrote Silent Impact 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. You talk about purpose, persistence, passion. You live that, Joe. I see it on TV. Your fans see it all over the place. But then when you're recovering from back surgery, you write the Impact Blueprint. Most of us would just be recovering from back surgery.
Yeah, and I wasn't planning on writing another book, and I really thought I was going to be out 4 to 5 weeks. And I was going to say, Netflix, I had 5 books I wanted to read. I thought, this is going to be great. I did it for one day, and I said, boy, this is boring. You know, it's like one of those things you dream about, but it wasn't that good. And I had been making videos for a lot of clients who I speak to, and we call them impact resolutions, where they concentrate on a trait for a month. And the companies I work with actually choose those traits. And all of a sudden, I realized I had a lot of content. So I said, I'm just going to start writing chapters on each one of these impact resolutions that I've done for a while. Next thing I knew, I kind of had a book. And I started doing research. I dug a little deeper on this one, doing some research, talking to really smart people. I'm not an expert on trust. So I talked to Dave Horsager, who's the #1 expert on trust in the world. I'm not an expert on happiness. So I talked to Dan Buettner from National Geographic, who's written books on the happiest people in the world and the people who live the longest in the world. That's the way I did it.
Let's talk about some of those traits. Trust is a big one. And I've had a chance to talk with David also. He is terrific on this topic. What did you learn about trust that you didn't know before?
Well, just how much money trust can cost a company. You know, you take a look at WCCO radio. If they didn't give the news right, if they didn't give the weather right, the school reports, all the things they're famous for, if people didn't trust them, nobody would listen to them. Look how much a breach of trust cost Tiger Woods. Look how much a breach of trust cost companies who all of a sudden let your information from your credit card get out. And then when you think about it, how many friendships and relationships have you lost over the years because of trust? Trust is a really, really important thing.
It's so fundamental. You also have other traits. But before we get to some of my favorites from your book, The Impact Blueprint, I want to talk about the trust that you've developed over decades now as a broadcaster, coming in to people's homes, as well as with all the athletes and the coaches, even youth sports athletes you talk with. What's your fundamental sort of purpose as well as intention when you talk with any of these people?
That's a really good question. I think it's to tell their story. And I think the reason I lasted a long time in the TV business is I'm a storyteller at heart. And I'm interested in people, so I ask questions like you do. And then when you can tell their stories and make it about them and not about you, I think that really helps matters.
You have to respect that role, don't you?
Yeah. I think, a lot of times we see a lot of people who make it all about them. And the one thing I've learned about when I study people of impact is people of impact make it about other people. Now, the byproduct is that everybody likes this person. He or she lives a significant life because of it.
I love that. Well, one of your other traits you get into, and there are 52 chapters in your new book, mm-hmm. and 52 different traits are covered. And you have stories. Short, easy.
By design.
Right. It's a little thicker than your previous book, but it looks great, and it is great. You've got a lot of stories in there. I want to get into some that really struck me, though. Forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. And forgiveness, I used my story. And I told a story about when I was in high school, there was a girl who was a little bit different. She got picked on, and I was one of the guys who joined in the picking on. And I am not proud of it, and I thought about it for many, many years. And, today we would call it bullying. And I went back for a class reunion several years ago, and I thought about her all the way on the ride there. And she had never been to a class reunion before. I walked in the door, she's the first person I saw. And I knew what I had to do, and I eventually went and apologized to her. And we had a really nice conversation. At the end of the night, she came back and hugged me and told me she'd see me in 5 years. We're now Facebook friends. As a matter of fact, I just sent her this book. She thanked me for the chapter. And we've been having an online conversation almost every day, just because she wants to talk. She was trying to forgive herself for allowing it to happen. And I said, you know what? I said, forgiveness is the first thing you have to do is be able to forgive yourself. Then you can forgive other people. And I said, I had to kind of forgive myself for being an idiot. And then when I got your forgiveness, it really worked. But I said, I look back and I said, the people I'm having a hard time forgiving are the people who saw it, adults that saw it happen that didn't stop it. Because if somebody would have grabbed me by the shirt and said, knock it off, Schmit, I would have.
Wow. Well, what I love about Real Leaders with Roshini is these real leaders get real with us. Thank you, Joe. I mean, what a vulnerable story. And it also shows that it's never too late for forgiveness.
It's never too late for forgiveness. And it's one of the hardest things in the world to do. And it kind of goes with the chapter I have, Let It Go. You know, the other thing I think that's really hard is to let it go. We all have regrets. We all made mistakes. We're all human. You have to learn to let it go and move on. And the big thing is, if you learn from your mistake, it's easier to let it go. If you learn from your mistake, it's easier to forgive yourself. And when you get the forgiveness from somebody else that you have not done something nice to, it really was worthwhile.
Communication is so important, and that is your chapter 42. Really interesting. Recently, I got a wonderful email from a friend who we had a gap, and she really wanted to figure out. She thought it was because she had done X. She asked if we could get together. We had lunch, and actually, I was a little hurt by her, but it was because of Y, not X. So the very fact that we were able to sit down and talk about it, and I thanked her for writing that email to me, because I had missed her too.
I think I say in the book, a lack of communication ends businesses. A lack of communication is the reason relationships fail. A lack of communication is the reason marriages fail. And a lot of times it's just because we're the XY factor. You know, we are not actually opening up and communicating what is our issue, what is our problem. And it takes guts. You know, sometimes it takes courage. You know, I call them chicken calls. You know, are you going to make that chicken call and say, hey, let's get together because something's bothering me? And if you do, the results are usually pretty good.
One of talking about guts, chapter 37 is about Scrappy, being scrappy. What is your advice for folks?
Well, you know, Scrappy is kind of the new resilience, right? And in life today, you have to be resilient because there's going to be a lot of things that happen to you, a lot of outside factors that will affect you and what you're trying to do. And I just figured out that scrappy was a good word because it was a word and a term that I think people who are scrappy and people who, you know, I'll use a sports analogy. When the puck goes in the corner, you want to be the person that comes out with the puck. That person is described as scrappy. Well, put that in real life situation, whether it's business or your personal life. Are you scrappy? Are you able to think on your feet? Are you able to get things done that other people can't get done because you have that ability?
I love it. Well, we have to talk a little bit more about sports. You are the sports director at the ABC affiliate in Minneapolis, St. Paul. You have interviewed now over decades various characters,
yes,
various wins and losses you've seen. You've covered all the major events. Was there anyone that really surprised you?
That's a really good question. I mean, I've been lucky enough to, you know, cover guys like Tony Dungy, you know, who walks the walk, talks the talk. You know, his book Uncommon is one that I go back and read every once in a while. As a matter of fact, I'm going to an event this week that Tony is hosting. I admire him just because of that. And I've also interviewed a lot of big names. I've interviewed, you know, Muhammad Ali, Tiger Woods, all these different people. But the interview that always keeps coming back to me is I interviewed a coach from Northwestern College in Roseville. His name was Chubb Reynolds, and he was dying of cancer. And I sat on his golf cart for 3 hours, and it was my Tuesdays with Maury moment. And I wish I would have recorded the entire interview because I would have had a Tuesdays with Maury book. But it was really the inspiration and what a dying man was thinking about. And you know what he thought about? He wondered if he had a big enough impact on the world. And I thought, and then when you talk to his players and anybody who was around with him, they loved him. And he had a huge impact. He lived a life of significance, not because of the football games he won, but because of the impact he had on people. He helped these kids become better people just by being a coach.
Wow. Well, Joe, I have to say you have had an impact on me as a fellow past TV reporter. I am, watching you all these years, and you have been resilient. You've gone through the ups and downs, the trends. You left TV for a while and worked in an entirely different industry. And I feel like you came back to TV and it made you better.
I agree. Thank you for saying that.
I mean, I'm saying it with complete respect because you were really good before.
Well, that's very nice of you. And you know what the difference was? And I got to be careful how I say this, but I didn't care anymore. And what I didn't care about was the noise. I didn't care about what people thought. I didn't care about the noise you get in the newsroom, or you get cut time, or you're not going to have the money to go on this trip to cover this, because I didn't care about things I couldn't control. What I could control was having a really fun sports office, having a good culture in our sports office, and trying to do good TV every night. And it really kind of freed me up. And I think that it's really hard to tell kids, but don't care. Don't care about the crap.
Work hard on your own stuff,
right,
but don't care about the crap.
It's the work hard, play hard, have fun. And every day in our sports office, if we don't have a couple of good laughs, it's not a good day. But that also means we worked hard and we tried to make sure we covered things right and work smart. The other thing is working hard is one thing, but make sure you work smart.
And I can see it in your face. You're having fun. There's no stress. There's no tension. And that helps us watch you and relax and also believe and trust what you're telling us.
And I do sports. This is not brain surgery. But we try to tell people stories. And I also am the kind of person that gets bored easily. So I don't want to put boring TV on. So I look for angles. I always say to the guys when they go out, they're going to cover the Gopher hockey team. I said, what's your angle? And they'll look and say, what do you mean? I said, well, just don't go. I don't want to hear about how they match up against Wisconsin. Boring. Give me an angle. Okay, kid just scored his first goal as a senior. I said, there, you got an angle. It took him until a senior to score his goal. That's our story. That's a people story. And so I kind of hammer that home. I remember watching Michael Jackson. Probably shouldn't be bringing this up with him in the news, but he's got that This Is It. Have you ever watched that documentary?
Yes.
Okay. There's one part in there that really stuck with me. And he's working with these guys on the concert, and he goes, we have to let this sizzle. Let this sizzle. And I thought, that's exactly what you're talking about. How do you make it sizzle? It's kind of when you talk about what's your wow, what's your sizzle. How do you make that different? How do you make that stand out? And that's what I try to do. You
definitely own your wow. I have to ask you, because we are in Capitol Grill, if you could be a cocktail or a spirit or a wine, what would Joe Schmit be?
Wow. I was going to say an old fashioned, but I don't want to be that guy. The one thing when you're around a long time, you got to be careful. Say back in the good old days. So maybe I would be instead of that, maybe just a good old light beer.
Wow, I would not have guessed that. And why a light beer, Joe?
Because when you got a beer belly, that's what you drink. I like all the IPA stuff and what have you, but I'm always going, well, I can save 50 calories.
I love it. I love it. Wow. Well, continued success to you. Continued success with the Impact Blueprint, your second book. It's available everywhere. People can find it.
My website, you can get it off my website. You can get it on Amazon.
JoeSchmit.com or on Amazon. And I am just so happy that you came to chat with us on Real Leaders with Roshini. Thanks, Joe, for being with us.
I'm happy to be your friend, and I love what you do. You do spread goodness.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Joe Schmit. And until next time, keep it real.